Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in moral laws by Edgar Sheffield Brightman, published in 1933. We're going to look at the final lesson, pages 242 to 287. We're going to look at the ideal of personality and how the ideal of personality imprints the empirical personality. Let's begin with block 1. And Brightman says that all persons should guide their actions by the ideal conception of becoming. This is the reflexive moment of interpretive construction. We construct a systematic unity of purpose, or we revise the already pre-existing unity of purpose. We synthesize autonomy and ideal control. In other words, our ideals are both self-imposed and they also should imprint empirical reality. And all of this falls under the obligation to give life purpose and to construct a systematic form of ideals, our ideal sign model. Now, ideal personality is always tested in experience. We presuppose a unity of consciousness as that which accrues the value data of experience, and the forces that are present in this ideal of personality are obligation to posit and realize value and rational law, to evaluate, systematize, and go out in praxis. The notion of oughtness abbreviates both obligation and reason. It abbreviates both obligation and reason. Verification has to pass through outgoing praxis. Ideal of personality is exemplified in Jesus Christ, of course, for Brightman, for all believers. Then he wants to talk about ideal personality and universality. Personal ideal is the culminating ethical principle in his system. Devotion to truth is an experience of personal value. Personal ideal is always attentive to universal truth. Eternal values ennoble all persons who are loyal to them. So our personal ideal is always an expression of universality, the universal truth. But if you look at note 4, we're trying to imprint empirical personality. The conflict between empirical value and ideal value takes place within empirical personality. It's an autonomous struggle. The given that we confront consists of the environment, our habits, and our impulses. We seek to imprint empirical personality with ideal personality. And we do that in that return moment out of praxis. So if you look at note 5, variety, each person must systematically frame the ideal by enlisting value data, imagination, and aesthetic variety. So this sign model will include personal diversification. It's always dynamic, it's always ongoing, it's always an ongoing dialectic. And then finally, under consciousness, the dialectic and its reflexive moment always implies an ongoing unitary plan that's in progress. We posit our model as a presence before the mind. Remember, that's the realm of positing, that filter through which we view reality. So it's always a positing before the mind. It becomes not only intended praxis, but also instrument of criticism as a force to spur us on to highest capable value and highest capable value maturity in the return moment out of praxis. That takes us on to block 2. And in block 2, we want to take a look at ideal personality and autonomy. Moral law is in cooperation with aesthetics. And Brightman says basically the Hebrews were ethical, they promoted the good. The Greeks were aesthetic, they promoted the beautiful. each bears on our view of the cosmos, says Brightman. Ethics addresses the will, aesthetic addresses the feelings. Aesthetics is usually complete in itself, ethics is related to the entire relevant environment. Both factors develop within the same personality, but Brightman says under the concept of priority or primacy, that always belongs to moral law. But moral law should seek out the fullest possible aesthetic value. They are interrelated. Moral law is also in cooperation with religion. Ethics and religion are closely related. God is viewed as creator of the moral order of the universe, but a substantial part of the basis of religion lies in ethics. Ethics is logically prior to religion, says Brightman. History of religion is the history of the purification of faith by ethics. Therefore, we are forced to investigate the relationship between autonomy and theonomy. That takes us to note 3, moral law as an autonomy leading to a theonomy. Moral law is autonomous and independent of religion. However, it is related in the following ways because it derives its content from religion and it is subject to the God who created all moral beings. The conclusion, Brightman says, is this: moral law is an expression of the reason of God. Autonomy becomes our guide to authentic theonomy, of realizing that our autonomy is abbreviated under the theonomy of God Himself and God's Spirit. That takes us on to block 3, moral law and metaphysics. Under metaphysics, metaphysics is the rational account of reality as a whole. Hegel derived ethical theory from metaphysics, but Brightman says ethics is logically prior to metaphysics. Metaphysics does modify our idea of the best possible, however. Now, under the notion of freedom, freedom is the self's act of choice as not absolutely determined by the preceding situation. Causation is internal to the act, not external. Freedom addresses a situation as genuine, living, spiritual whole. Ethics must presuppose freedom. Now, under dependency, ethics posits the metaphysical validity of freedom. Metaphysics is a free product of spirit. Metaphysics exists, says Brightman, as persons choose to freely appropriate it. Any systematic metaphysics must include an account of ethics. That's a given for Brightman. Any systematic metaphysics must include an account of ethics. Only idealist philosophy can give a coherent personalistic interpretation to moral law. Thus, Brightman's system does give that personalistic interpretation of moral law. So he does give attention to metaphysics, obviously, but metaphysics is that which comes after ethics. Ethics is logically prior to metaphysics. But basically, Brightman tells us in this closing lesson that personality is basically, we have an ideal of personhood, an ideal of what it means to be a person living in spirit. We have a concept of ideal personality. We want that concept of ideal personality to imprint our own empirical personality. We want to mature in spirit. We want to grow in spirit. We want to be fruit-bearing in spirit. So we want ideal personality to imprint empirical personality. How do we do that? We do that not simply as autonomy, but in Block 2 we do that with the help of aesthetics, we do that with the help of religion, we do that by realizing that we really live under a authoritative and enclosing theonomy. We have the objective reality of a living God. And that creates a theonomy, and our autonomy is simply that which becomes a guide to recognizing theonomy. But it's all about, in this final lesson, appropriately, Brightman's teaching us about reflexive moment. Reflexive moment. After outgoing praxis, there's a return moment of interpretive construction. What are we reinterpreting? What are we constructing? An ideal value model of ideal personality. Not just a model of kingdom, but a model of personhood to accompany model of kingdom. So we have two sign models. We got a sign model for kingdom. We got a sign model for authentic personhood under Christ. And both of those become interpreted and revised in the reflexive moment of returning out of praxis ministry. The reflexive moment is this final lesson from 242 to 287. Brightman is addressing reflexive moment, and then reflexive moment is about imprint. It's about returning into the self and imprinting the empirical self with the ideal personality that is gathered in that surplus of value that returns out of every action of ministry. There's always a surplus, there's always more than what we can actually grasp initially. So the return out of praxis ministry allows us to reinterpret our ideal personality and then imprint through internalization our empirical personality, our empirical personhood with ideal personality. And that will in turn, of course, cause us to adjust our metaphysical model, our ideal model of kingdom. That will in turn affect ideal model of value and motivational base of the heart. All of that becomes imprinted in return reflexive moment. So we get a great look at reflexive moment. We get a critical look at reflexive moment as we conclude a beautiful book by Brightman. He really has given us the comprehensive view of his system as logic of faith, as experimental positing, outgoing desire, and interpretive construction, which abbreviates three categorical laws: formal law, axiological law, personalistic law, which in turn abbreviates a multitude of conceptual principles. So we've learned through this manuscript the three-tier system of Brightman's personalism. It's logic, category, concept. It's a hierarchy of logic, category, and concept. And that's going to wrap up this final lesson, and that's going to wrap up Moral Laws by Edgar Sheffield Brightman. And our next topic we will discuss in Life Group, and then we'll move into a new study.